Hello everybody and welcome to Bernardotech. A couple weeks ago I did an unboxing and review of the IcyCube external hard drive enclosure provided to us courtesy of IcyDock, and as promised in that video I'm back this time with some benchmarks. You can find a link to that video in the description below, as well as some other links to get more information or to purchase this product. Now you can use either a USB or an eSata cable to plug the IcyCube into your computer. And obviously if you're using USB, it can be either version 2 or version 3, and of course those have different speeds. On the screen you can see right now the different maximum transfer rates of those three interfaces, and notice I have it in both megabits per second and megabytes per second. I've translated that for you because megabytes is the unit of measurement that we'll be using as we do these benchmarks. I have three hard drives currently in the IcyCube. I have a 2.5-inch hard drive from Seagate that's 5400 RPM. I have a 3.5-inch hard drive from Western Digital, 7200 RPM, and finally a 2.5-inch solid-state drive from Samsung. The first test machine is going to be a Dell PowerEdge T130, and you can see the rest of the specs on the screen. The first benchmarks we did were with the IcyDock plugged into a USB version 2 port. And if you choose to use USB version 2, it will limit the transfer rates of your hard drive significantly. If we look at the 2.5-inch hard drive, it doesn't restrict those too much. The write speeds fall about 25 megabytes per second, and the read speeds are up between 40 and 45. 3.5-inch hard drive, the read and write speeds are around 45. And that's essentially the same speed as the SSD when we're using USB 2.0. Now if we move on to USB version 3, we can see just how much using version 2 restricts the speed of these drives. The 2.5-inch hard drive, you see that the write speed did not change much, but we get between 60 and 70 megabytes per second read speed if we have a bigger pipe, as we do with the USB version 3. With a 3.5-inch hard drive, we see that read and write is up around 120 megabytes per second, so we've basically doubled our speed or a little more by moving to USB version 3. Then finally the SSD, we can see it's much faster, basically about 10 times the speed that it was when we used USB version 2. Now moving on to eSata, I had to use a different machine for that because I didn't have one single machine that had both USB 3 and eSata, and so we have to use a different machine, which I know isn't ideal, but hopefully we can still learn a little bit about the eSata speeds. So it's a Dell Latitude E6510. The rest of the specs are right there, and here are the eSata benchmarks. Something that I find very interesting, and I don't have an explanation for, is the 2.5-inch hard drive. We see that the write speeds have increased. So even with the USB 3, the write speeds were around 25. Now they're up around 50 because we're using eSata. The read speeds are still the same as they would be with USB 3. Somehow the write speeds have increased. I don't know the explanation for that. Maybe someone can comment on why that would be the case. Moving over to the 3.5-inch hard drive, we basically see the same speeds here as we would with USB version 3. Even though the eSata, at least in theory, should be a little bit faster, the 3.5-inch hard drive doesn't saturate that interface, and so it doesn't actually get any faster. Now moving over to the solid-state drive, I can't explain this either. It's possible that this eSata port is an early version on this laptop because we're not seeing the full speed of the SSD. I don't necessarily know that that's the fault of the IcyCube. I can't say that for sure, but I'm not sure why that we're limited to that. To 250 megabytes per second when obviously the SSD is capable of much faster. So a few things there that aren't explained, but hopefully these benchmarks will give you some idea what to expect. The biggest takeaway I can see is that I wouldn't go out of your way to get an eSata port if your computer doesn't already have one. Yes, it's a little faster, but if you're reading and writing to one drive at a time, you're really not going to saturate a USB 3 interface, and so there's really no benefit to going to eSata. Now one little caveat with that, if you have multiple drives in the IcyCube and you're reading and writing to several at once, it is possible that you would max out a USB 3 and could gain at least a little bit of performance increase by going to eSata. So that's pretty much all I have. If you have questions about the speed of these benchmarks, please put those questions in the comments below, and I'll try to respond to those as quickly as possible. As always, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.